Thanks, Amy Rose, and nice to be with you all. And consideration to Tracy for not being here today. She's not too well, so our thoughts are with her. And I'll go through our panelists today. We have Tom, Tommy, and Samira. And I'll just let you introduce yourselves. So Samira, let's start with you.
Good morning, everybody, or afternoon if you're on the in the Brisbane time zone. So yes, good morning. I'm Samira. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Elbaite. We are a crypto exchange started in 2017, purely focused on giving Australians access to the most direct and safest way to the digital economy. So that may be through self-custody cryptocurrency purchases or exchange holdings that will be directly under your name in a segregated wallet. So yes, excited to be here.
And Tom and Tommy.
I'll go next, Tom. Hi guys, nice to meet you. Thanks very much for the opportunity today with Deca. Fantastic panel, and thanks Alex for jumping in to support us on the moderation side. Tommy Honan from Swyftx, been with Swyftx for about 6 years, currently the director of product, so pretty much all things our web, all things application. If you don't know Swyftx, we're a crypto exchange, one of the largest in Australia, and we're servicing about 850,000 clients as of today. Yeah, very excited to be here and share some insights today, guys.
Great. I'll take over. I'm unmuted now. Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. Tom Prizeman here. I'm a part of the Coinstash accounts team. I've been an investor in the space for probably about 7 or 8 years with a background in economics. So I'm quite familiar with the traditional financial space. And yeah, if you don't know much about Coinstash, we're another exchange, another one of Australia's platforms that focuses on quite a high-touch experience. We look after a lot of self-managed super funds, trust accounts, company accounts, and yeah, we're grateful to be a part of the platform today.
Great. And we'll start off with some general trends that you're all seeing. So Tom, can you give us an overview of the current trends you're seeing in financial inclusion within the investment and payment space? And how are these trends evolving globally and locally?
Yeah, so again, my background again is mainly in the investing and now client relations since I started with Coinstash. So I kind of will focus my thoughts around that. But for me, I think financial inclusion today is really about ensuring that everyone has access first. And then beyond that, it's do they have access to experiences that are secure and within high quality financial services and products. I think we've seen a pretty significant shift in how people access investment and payment opportunities. And much of that is driven by decentralized technology and of course digital assets. On a global level, again, from an investor background, I think blockchain and crypto are like democratizing finance. On one hand, blockchain makes it easier than ever to tap into financial services. For example, Bitcoin, it's a safe haven amidst the current market volatility in the crypto space. It's got a growing market share, and I think it reflects investors' preference for stability over riskier digital assets. At the same time, however, I think speculative funds are starting to become quite scattered across thousands of microcap tokens. Some meme coins have generated rapid gains. Many projects end up failing, and they can permanently drain liquidity from the market. So this kind of scattering, coupled with the ease to create new tokens, I think has led to a lot of short-lived, high-risk ventures that often result in losses for investors. And so that's the kind of point for me to drive is if we're going to keep getting people access to the space, how do we make sure that their experience is a high quality one? On the other side of that, I think there is a big trend towards self-sovereign finance, which is very promising. That's for people who want to take control of their wealth outside traditional banking systems. And Bitcoin perfectly embodies that shift. It offers a tool for anyone with an internet connection to use. So I think that emphasis on personal empowerment is laying the foundation for a broader financial inclusion and creating an ecosystem built for open access. But it does come down to the big role players in the space to provide improvements so that we're seeing better quality, whether it's for layer 2 solutions like Starknet and ZK Sync, which are your like express lanes for digital transactions. They make processing faster, cut down fees, or new blockchains designed to handle heavy traffic with less energy, which allows for, that greater adoption, so the system remains both efficient and sustainable. So that's my global kind of view right now, is that balance between growth but also quality control. I think locally is a tricky one for me. I've only been in the Australian industry, like I said, for about a year with Coinstash, but I do focus on one interesting area, which is the self-managed super funds. These funds like originated from the 1980s, and they have always been a way for people to directly manage their retirement savings, which I think has got quite a good marriage with what Bitcoin's original purpose was, which is that sovereign control of your wealth. And I think that, it's become a really popular vehicle. I've seen, we went to a conference just last week in Melbourne, and to see a lot of the traditional financial professionals starting to embrace and look for ways to provide their clients solutions with self-managed super funds tells me that in Australia, we are starting to get a better framework, and it's evolving. And there's a momentum towards integrating blockchain-based products into mainstream investment strategies.
That's very interesting. And are you seeing an increase in the self-managed super fund interest?
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of happening as we speak. Like I went to my first year with Coinstash last year, we went to the SMSF advisor events, and it was a little bit more hesitant. I think with what's happened with the last 12 months of, policy shifting and pro crypto kind of governments kind of popping out, I think the financial market is kind of waking up, and they're moving away from a kind of a head in the sand approach to we're still not sure how we can help, but we're reaching out to platforms like all of the panelists today to get that guidance and to integrate a little bit better with the established companies in crypto to just make sure that particularly Australian investors are getting the opportunities to be a part of the digital asset space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great vehicle for average Australians to get into crypto in a safe way as well, because self-managed supers have such stringent rules. So that's really good. So which technological advancements or products do you think are truly changing the game when it comes to access to investment and payment opportunities? And how can these innovations benefit underserved communities?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think one that kind of sparks a lot of people's interest in crypto in the first place is like, how can it benefit people, especially those who are in struggling kind of financial positions. I think the most obvious one for me is just the decentralized finance platforms that popped up in your your 2017 beyond kind of era. I think of them as your digital banks without physical walls. These are platforms that transform the way we access investments and payments. I think I started kind of participating in the early days with some platforms like Compound and Aave and Uniswap. And I know these are still, they've done a lot of work since when I first encountered them, but they basically let anyone with an internet connection lend, borrow, and trade assets. And these environments haven't been seen before, and they bypass these traditional gatekeepers of those services. So they're really important. I feel like it's having an open 24/7 financial marketplace where you just need your smartphone and it acts as your personal bank branch. And for the people, like you said, in those underserved communities, this just means that they get access to credit and investment without the tough requirements that traditional banks often impose. But it's not a perfect replacement yet. For example, I see DeFi innovations being used to help. Sorry, I was just saying, I think whilst they are being used they could be used to help lower income and regional communities, whereas I don't think that's exactly what they're predominantly used for currently. But I think in the future, DeFi lending platforms can provide those small kind of loans that people need without the high credit scores. This can help you start a small business. It can help you invest in education, improve the environment in your home. So I think, yeah, once we get people access to these DeFi environments, I think they can get a better opportunities when it comes to economic stability and growth.
Absolutely. I've seen figures about 1 billion people don't have access to the regular banking system. So there's definitely a huge market there and a huge segment of people that need this sort of service.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think just on that, I think it's less about let's switch everything over to DeFi, in my opinion, and it's more about a future where you use DeFi's improvements, I guess, the low fees, the constant accessibility and transparency, and that offsets some of the issues with traditional banking. But we still need traditional banks to provide the stability and a lot of the consumer protection. So I think that kind of demonstrates how we can work together in a more inclusive kind of way.
And Tom, from your experience, what are the major barriers people face when trying to access these opportunities via traditional systems, and how can we overcome those hurdles?
Yeah, so as we all know, like the traditional financial systems are kind of like an exclusive club, and that can really start to create a barrier that extends into a bit of a inequality, and it can extend over generations, I think. So I think in contrast, crypto and blockchain technology counters this in some areas, so it can encourage the opposite, which is your principles of inclusion. So I do see platforms like the ones that are represented today, Bamboo, Elbaite, Swyftx, and my firm Coinstash, provide that user-friendly experience that with kind of lowers the technical barriers. So that's a really great way to access crypto, and it's great for those who have yet to make it to our system. But I think the important part is before these tools, it lies what's early education look like, what do community hubs look like. I personally started a community hub, a community event last year in the Sunshine Coast, which is where I grew up, and I've always wanted to share what I've learned, and now I get to connect like all of the brilliant people I've met in the industry with the Sunshine Coast community, and it was great. Amy Rose actually came along, and I didn't realize she lived up there, but it just goes to show there's so many experienced people that can provide a lot of value to the smaller communities. And I also wanted to shout out, like, I think the platforms do a great job as well. Like Elbaite has a learn crypto feature. Swyftx, I think, is one of the leading platforms. They've got a learn and earn, which is really robust. And these are examples of how platforms can level the playing field. So not everyone who's got financial literacy can, excel and see success. It provides an environment where everyone can kind of get access. So yeah, I think the real progress starts early education, then ongoing support as you actually, you're a young adult looking at how to set yourself up for life.
Exactly. Those outreach programs are very important, and there's a surprisingly large amount of people from the sunny coast in the industry. So it's a good
For
sign.
sure. Yeah, that's good. Looking forward to connecting with them.
And Tommy, you've mentioned that the barrier to entry has never been so low, but banks and payment restrictions still cause distress for new users. How can we make the onboarding process smoother and more user-friendly?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's kind of a bit of a two-pronged approach, or a multifaceted approach to it. The payment restrictions, and I know everybody on the panel speaking today, and a lot of people probably tuned into the session, are well aware of some of the issues we are having in payment restrictions. There's some kind of, I guess, in our view, some arbitrary numbers have been put in place to slow down the flow of investment coming to platforms like ours. And look, there's definitely good reason for a lot of these things being in place. Consumer protection and keeping investors safe is at the forefront of why a lot of these things, why a lot of these measures are put in place. However, I guess it's probably something that we would like to have a bit more insight and open a bit more collaboration into how the outcomes are actually achieved versus the actual restrictions. It's at the end of the day, it's about outcomes. Actually keeping investors safe and making sure that the end goal is actually faced on that versus anything else. But going back to the onboarding, I guess, I'm definitely going to put my product hat on here and speak about, very specific things that the average person can resonate with. I think access is just such it's changed so much, and we've come so far in even, I probably started in crypto in 2013, and it was impossible, right? Like it was you really needed to be in the weeds to try and understand even just how to get money in and how to make an investment. It was you really had to be kind of deeply technical, I guess, at that stage, or at least in the right kind of forums to be able to do what you needed to do. Today we've got platforms like Tom mentioned are represented today, fantastic vehicles for access. The whole Australia versus the rest of the world conversation is also something I'll probably touch on a little bit later. But in terms of practical use case, like one-click social type logins, we've got passkey type access, intuitive kind of mobile experiences. We're really spoiled in Australia for choice, which is a really good problem to have from a geographical perspective, but also for the end user and the investor, getting that better experience. I think tailoring experience based on experience levels, tailoring the actual approach and the user journeys that each customer goes through is really important as well. Crypto and this digital asset space is not a one-size-fit-all industry of products. It is very much a lot of different people at different levels, and you have to be really aware when you are dealing with multiple investors and experience levels and time in the market. As a business, we really have to evolve, like daily, weekly, monthly. We have to be evolving with our customer, with our product offerings. I often talk about it internally as like partnering with your customer to expand on their needs, and it is something that customer needs change. They come in from at a 0 to 1, trying to just onboard and trying to find out what KYC means, and you bring them all the way to setting up recurring orders and investments and self-custody, and it's such a large journey for a lot of people to come on. So you have to be hyper aware as a platform like ours and the other companies mentioned today. I think having fiat onboarding rails, we kind of touched about the banking restrictions. I just think having multiple of those, and obviously there's a trade-off between I know Samira will probably talk about the trade-off between spending engineering time, highly valuable resourcing in different areas of your business, and I guess building out multiple options for users to deposit via card offerings. With Stripe we've got on board at the moment. You've got things like pay-to agreements now that are starting to come to the forefront for users to get that instant access to get funds onto the platform. And I think just in general, educating users in-app, so in the experiences in real time when they're actually going through those journeys is super important. One of the things we're seeing a lot of on the Swyftx side, going back to the banking restrictions, is people actually don't understand. So they're thinking that they've been scammed, or something has happened to their funds in transit. And that's something that we're really focusing on at the moment, like front-end notifications to try and let people know that this is normal, this is actually expected, and this is largely a kind of a time delay versus anything else. But I guess if you're a new person, you're coming into that investment, you are quite new. The trust element is something that takes time to build, and it's something that wouldn't necessarily be in place yet. So the last point I want to mention on, I guess, where we are today versus where we were, even 2016 and 17. I can remember like today we've got, I think, 30-second support tickets, so you can start up a live chat support with our customer support people and get a response within 30 seconds to a minute. A lot of platforms are kind of doing this today. Back in 2016, I can remember sending in tickets to some overseas platforms from my own account personally, and the tickets would automatically close after about 4 weeks without a response. So in terms of where we've come in that period of time, I think everything is getting better for the user, everything is getting safer, we're building that trust. We've still got things to do. We're not there yet by any means, but that's kind of, I guess, the direction we're going in, and hopefully things continue to get safer and better for those users.
Yeah, I agree. The end experience for the user is just leaps and bounds ahead of where it was even 4 or 5 years ago. So you've spoken about the importance of education. How do you think we can help new users better understand these alternative investment systems, especially when they're faced with intimidating technology?
Yeah, this is one that I know I'll have a lot of support on some of my views here, but it's also something I don't think we do well enough as leaders in the space. I think part of it is just knowing your audience, right? Like if you go to do a presentation at a particular event, you gotta, if you're not doing your research on who your audience is, you're probably, starting off not on the best foot. But I think that's something that we have to be hyper aware of in our space as well. Things like, the age demographic, backgrounds, level of financial experience. These things all kind of help us as leaders, speakers, panel members, and just in industry in general, really tailoring our approach to how we're focused on educating users. They might not be users yet. There might be people that are hyper skeptical. I got a bunch of friends that still say they would never invest in crypto, that I've been, harping on with my story to them since, 2013 onwards. I think the steps that do need to be taken by us and leaders in the space, I think, is the element of demystifying crypto, digital assets, and that digital first terminology, I think, is really a good place to start. So like, if anyone's to take away anything from what I'm going to say here, is starting with our terminology, I think, is really important. It can be very difficult at times to cater to a wide variety of audiences, and this is why we really need to be aware of who the people we're speaking to are and conscious of the level in each room that we enter. For a vast majority of people, I know I've dealt with this many, many times in the past, the mere suggestion of being on chain, talking about different networks, cross-chain interoperability, and don't even get me started on like different forms of custody, hot, cold, warm, self custody. Like these things are huge barriers for people, and it often, if that's the starting point, it often they just give up and it's too hard and can be quite unapproachable for the average person. So I think that's something that we really need to focus on as an industry, really breaking down these barriers is the first point. And then another point on that is, I guess, telling stories that actually resonate with people. I'm Irish, as probably a lot of people either know or can hear through my accent today. We're a nation of storytellers, and I absolutely love telling a good story that can resonate with real people and actually giving them the real types of use cases to really paint a picture, which I think is always beneficial. On-chain payment speeds, using crypto as collateral to buy a house, like these kind of things are, I think, things that resonate, kind of focusing on the Australian market where everyone's obsessed with housing. It is something that I think they're the types of stories that I think people will really resonate, at least in this market. Highlighting the real life use cases and benefits to them is really where I think we're going to start to break down some of the barriers and really get them to think, okay, this is actually something that could benefit my life, as opposed to I just see it on the news every time it's trending, right? Because that's the big thing that we're dealing with today. As Tom mentioned, thanks Tom for calling out the Learn platform we have. Swyftx has built out a kind of dedicated Learn platform, Learn and Earn, which is almost like a second business to us, and we kind of treat it in that way, but also complementary to our own trading business. And this kind of caters to people of all experience levels, from, I mentioned, that 0 to 1 beginners, intro to Bitcoin, to like intermediate traders, like how to read charts and candles and these kind of things. So yeah, I guess the broad spectrum of education it's something we continuously need to focus on. And yeah, I think every business can always lean in and do more in that space.
My grandfather is Irish, and he also had a lot of good stories. So I think it sounds better in the Irish accent. So Tommy, with on-chain transfers and blockchain technology continuing to grow, how do you see the future of payments evolving, and what role will these technologies play in expanding financial inclusion?
Yeah, this is where I'm going to go back to the Australia versus the rest of the world conversation. Everybody, at least on this call, I'd imagine, is aware of kind of blockchain at a high level, at least how it works. We've seen massive growth across stable coins as a kind of a global remittance tool. There's businesses integrating it. It is, I think, my opinion is, it is one of the big killer use cases for blockchain technology, stablecoin transactions, and I guess the efficiencies that can be found there. The thing about it is, the Australian market doesn't really care, in my opinion, as much about that, because we've got real-time payments. We've got MPP, instant transfers. You can go on your banking app and pay to somebody's mobile number. like we're on a different level to the rest of the world, and I think sometimes we forget that. I know as I travel even back to Ireland and I spend time with friends, I see them using Revolut as an example, right? They use Revolut to pay each other, settle on a meal that they might have shared, and they're using other apps because the banking system doesn't work, like literally doesn't work for those types of use cases. So again, bringing it back to the use cases, I think Australia is largely like out on its own. We're not the only ones with real-time payments, but we're one of the few that actually have it in such a good capacity today. You think about the rest of the world and developing nations. This is obviously where the real problems lie, and this is the area I think we've seen businesses like Stables move into the African kind of market, and these are real problems being solved. Not just problems of saving money or the use case of wanting to transact or remit. These are actually problems that are being solved that save people's lives. Global remittance using platforms and businesses like I guess Remitly and these companies they still require a person a lot of the time to go into a physical place, get cash, and do all these kind of things. So I think the safety that it allows people or that it opens up people for in those types of markets is something that we'll never really get our head around in Australia. But when you look outside, it actually definitely makes a big difference. The other part is the trust and transparency. The being able to see everything on chain is just is amazing. We've obviously seen pretty high profile hack with Bybit over the weekend, and that's something that I think a lot of us are still getting our head around. But just the visibility of these assets on chain is something that is it's something we've never had before. In the past, you're waiting for remittance receipts, you're reaching out on email to get receipts from companies to see where is my money, is it in transit, how is it? So that's something that blockchain and, like I mentioned, those stablecoin types of developments definitely definitely brings us to a new level of transparency and visibility. Probably last point I mentioned is access to liquidity. I previously mentioned collateral of crypto. I think that's something that's really going to grow over the next 5 to 10 years. Kind of, I guess, finishing what Michael Saylor has started with MicroStrategy or Strategy, now that he's renamed it. We know, from Swyftx perspective, and I'm sure the other businesses here, we know millions of Australians are holding crypto today. And I guess I see in the future giving us the great unlock with respect to crypto that's being held on platforms like Swyftx, Elbaite, on non-custody, but Coinstash as well. So that is something as a trend that I see growing significantly, and probably another key part for that access and education.
Great, thank you, Tommy. And Samira, do you see any major differences in financial inclusion efforts between regions, especially when it comes to access to investment opportunities and payment systems? And how can we bridge this gap?
Yeah, so the topic of our panel today, really, I think it is actually just at that global level. Whenever I think about crypto, I always come back to the thesis, and one of the reasons why I fell in love with crypto originally. The thesis behind crypto is that a borderless and trustless payment system can exist through cryptocurrency, through Bitcoin. And so I guess this is the experiment that we're all trying to see and validate whether that is actually true, whether we can make that a reality. And I think from all the signals and all the trends that we're seeing over the years, and so just a reminder, Bitcoin was launched in 15 years ago. No, sorry, 18 years ago. And so what has happened over the 18 years? Have we addressed that thesis? And I think really we have. I think all trends are pointing positively towards that. I love looking at numbers. So I just did a bit of a comparison, and we've got some awesome stats that compares Australia versus global. So ASIC in 2022, it is a bit old, but I do think their survey was really awesome. They saw that, in Australia itself, we have a good crypto adoption itself. As a nation, we are an investment heavy nation, so we do know about shares. We know about all the different other avenues of investing, and it was really actually great to see that cryptocurrency has become part of people's portfolios. And what I thought was really interesting out of that survey was that they found that there was a large percentage of the crypto holders, around 30% of the crypto holders, that they only held crypto. So what that tells me is that in Australia specifically, we are actually creating a new cohort of investors. And so what that tells me is that we are breaking down maybe some barriers that other traditional investment forms may have. What kind of barriers do we have in Australia? I think really we have this bit of age issue that we have. So this wealth divide between the young and the older generation, so that access to other investment forms may not be as compelling. And we've also recently seen an inflation period, so that's also kind of made everyone think about, how can I hedge against the inflation that we're currently seeing. So in Australia, we're pointing towards more inclusion. Just even on the male to female ratio, we've got around 50% of all investor types, 50% are male, and 35% identify as female, and the rest are other sexualities. So basically what we're seeing is a great divide. We're seeing a great even spread throughout usually what we can consider people that may not have had access. So now if we think about globally, what's happening globally, also a really great picture. We're seeing there was this really great survey brought out by AAA. Their report was about 2024. And so they see that the global average is 6.9% of the global population holds crypto. And what I found super interesting about that is of the top 5 nations that hold the most amount of crypto, of the top 5, 3 were developing nations. So those were nations like Turkey, Argentina, and Thailand, and then closely followed by Brazil and Vietnam. So again, that's a really awesome picture, just pointing to the fact that traditional barriers through traditional investment and payment opportunities are being broken, and access to crypto is easier. That's my review. I think we're doing a really great job at proving that point of crypto, that this is a borderless and trustless payment system that can break down a lot of the barriers that we do see in a lot of payment and investment systems that we traditionally have been experienced with.
As we move further into decentralized finance, regulation will inevitably play a key role. So, Samira, how can regulators help create an environment that fosters innovation while ensuring protection for users?
So regulation is a really interesting topic. The influence, no doubt, we all know it's a huge swing in the influence. Either it can really dramatically actually stifle the industry as a whole, or it can flourish the industry. If we just look back at the year that just passed, 2024, my God, that was a great year of case studies. There were all sorts of regulations that influenced both good and bad. Just to name a few, if we look back at the start of the year, the Bitcoin ETF being approved in the US drove a huge amount of institutional liquidity into the crypto sphere. So currently, right now, we have 100 billion market cap sitting in the Bitcoin ETF market. So that's amazing. So that is just one example that, with good measured regulation, we can see an increased adoption in the crypto sphere. Now, the other interesting one, the one that just happened very, very recently, was I'm going to bring up the Trump meme coin. I think that was really interesting and a really interesting use case that can just prove to the point that we do need a bit more regulation to protect consumers in general. So what happened with this Trump meme coin, it could have been a great thing. It could have been a great example of using the crypto community's, I guess, best practices that we have built around token launches, right? Token launches have been going on for over a decade now. And so we've already learnt what is good behavior and what is bad behavior. And I really reckon that the Trump meme coin launch could have it had an opportunity to showcase all of the good best practices that we as a community know about. But instead they decided to launch with a lot of the bad examples. So, it's a coin with no real tokenomics, launched through only unregulated decentralized exchanges, and overall it was an unfair coin launch. And so as we saw, a lot of retail investors have lost their investments. So it's an interesting one. So yeah, as we all know, the right sort of regulation can increase confidence, can create consumer protection, but also if we don't do it right, if we don't study, if we don't understand how the crypto market works, we are also in danger of actually stifling this whole industry. So I think with regulators, I would love to see more discussion and understanding with some of the best practices that we as an industry have already built and understood. So these are not regulated best practices, they are not enforced, but they are in that crypto sphere just understood as best practices. We have those. And so what we can, very easily do is maybe translate some of those best practices into legislation, rather than just fitting the current regulation for traditional markets and putting that onto the crypto market. There's a bit of a partnership that we need to try and form.
And are there any partnerships or collaborations that you think have been particularly successful in advancing financial inclusion? And how can more of these initiatives come to fruition?
Yeah, so there are a lot of great examples. I can speak about the self-custody movement have been really awesome and heartwarming for me personally, because just self-custody is such a big reason why we started Elbaite, and also why we continue to help that endeavor. But I think the most successful that we have seen as an industry is cross-border payments. And actually, it's really great to see that cross-border payments are seeing success. It is, again, hitting that thesis to the point, borderless payments, right? So I think more of that would be fantastic. So some of the success that USDC has shown we should celebrate it, right? $200 billion in market cap so far in a US dollar-based stablecoin is a great thing. It does mean that we can just prove the idea that, settlement times can be reduced. It's really actually a showcase of the technology, rather than the other innovative thinking behind crypto. But I'm still very happy to celebrate the cross-border payments and the USDC and US dollar-based stablecoin success that we're seeing. What I would love to see is more nation stablecoins participating at that level, to kind of spread that liquidity across different stablecoins, rather than just keep it US dollar-based dominance. But I think we will see that shift quite soon as nations look towards the US and what they're doing with their proposed US Bitcoin reserves. If that does happen, I think a lot of nations will also follow that example, and why would they want to miss out on that? And so I think through that, it will just create a cascade of this kind of nation-held reserves that I think will bring actually a lot of a lot of stability to the market. It also bring a lot of interesting new world for us crypto people.
Yeah, crypto is certainly becoming a treasury staple, and if it enters the strategic reserve, I think that would be fantastic news. So this is for the entire panel. How do you envision the future of financial inclusion? In the next 5 to 10 years, what major shifts do you think we will see in how people access investment opportunities and make payments?
I can kick that one off. Alec, yeah, I guess just doubling down on what I said earlier, a big trend that I guess I see playing out over the next 5 to 10 years is that crypto being solidified as a collateral asset, and that's something that we're starting to see today through some businesses. Even in Australia, we're seeing some businesses start to do this, but I think that's a key area, especially with respect to the Australian market more broadly. The access to capital, new investors coming into the market, new people trying to get on the property ladder. And I often go back to Bitcoin and I think about property and Bitcoin in the same type of, or speak about them in the same sentence. But the main reason for that is, we have a view that people want to keep their Bitcoin long term. They also potentially want to keep their house long term. You often can't have both. So how do you draw the divide between one and the other? And I think that's probably my main answer in terms of the trend over the next 5 to 10 years. It's that crypto collateral being built out.
Great, thank you. And Samira and Tom, 30-second answers from you.
My main prediction for the future is actually the Bitcoin dominance will actually further increase is my main prediction. So in that 5 to 10 years where we've got at least two more Bitcoin halvings, and with this US Bitcoin reserve, I guess that created kind of like a glimpse into the future for everyone. It kind of woke up the rest of the world about what we can potentially do, what's that full extent participation we can have. So through all that, I think the story about Bitcoin remaining the dominant asset, it's clear as day, I think.
Yeah, following on just from some comments made by Tommy and Samira about the age gap and the younger generation, I think I'd like to see a continued push for Australia's education system to integrate crypto and blockchain topics into your higher and your, maybe to a lesser extent, your secondary education. I know that your universities like Monash and RMIT are really fantastic at establishing these kind of things, but it goes all the way down to educators being able to start incorporating it into real world examples like math and commerce. And I think I would have loved to have seen that for myself with and this back when I was in university. This was prior to it being a widely known thing. So even just with traditional finance, I think there's a huge problem in Australia's education system with preparing young Aussies of different demographics to handle wealth in their future. And I really think that maybe a trendy thing like crypto can be that spark for the next generation.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining us today, Tom, Tommy, and Samira. And Amy Rose, I'll hand it over back to you.